Introducing your host, Brad.
On today's episode of the Enthusiast, we will be talking about the latest comics news, updates on the Phantom, and we are going to be joined by Kevin Patrick for this week's episode. So firstly, how are you going, Kevin? How has your day been?
My day's been very good, thanks, Bradley. It's been very productive. I've just come back to Australia. I've only been back in Australia for a few weeks. I'm back here in Melbourne. I've been living and working in the United States for the last few years, but time to come back, and I've just been spending the day gardening and doing lots of DIY housework and handiwork around the place. So it's been a very busy day.
That is very good to hear. So we are going to be starting off the Talkback Show with some big news from few publications. As of this week, the new comic that was supposed to come out this week has obviously, I think on Facebook, they announced in the last week or so that the comic will be delayed until next week. Hopefully we actually get this comic. We saw with the 2022 annual that it was delayed a couple of days. So I got my comic on the Tuesday after it came out, and this is what it looks like. It's pretty damn cool. It's a cover art by Glenn Lubston, he's amazing. He's a beautiful cover artist, and we'll get into this week's news. Coming up in this week's news, we have Boss Fight Studios release a new 5-inch Power Stars figurine. Hermes Press to release the Phantom Complete Dailies Volume 25. We asked 2 questions to our new guest, Patrick. Wrap the Talkback Show up with a new announcement for this week. Just for the past week, have been giving teaser after teaser for their new range of figurines. Their new range of figurines are part of a set of Power Stars range, which the height of these figurines is 5-inch, and the featured comic book characters include Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Ming the Merciful, and Thun, which I'm guessing Thun is like a caveman sort of person. I don't actually, when I was first looking at these figurines, and I thought that these figurines were pretty damn cool. I made a post on Facebook saying these look pretty damn good. These look fantastic. And next up, Hermes Press, I'll be putting an image up on the screen right now. Hermes Press are going to be releasing Volume 25 from the Phantom, the Complete Dailies book series. Now, obviously, in my collection, in the last couple of weeks, I've actually moved. So my collection is spread across 4 boxes basically, and I don't have any of these Hermes Press, the Phantom Complete Dailies book series. And so now we are going to be asking 2 questions to our guest, Kevin Patrick. So question number 1 is, tell us about your Phantom Unmarked book, which was published by you in 2017.
Okay, Bradley, first of all, thanks for having me on The Enthusiast. It's great to join you on this podcast, and thank you for that very exhaustive and highly detailed update on all the latest Phantom merchandise news and the Phantom comic strip reprints from Hermes Press. No doubt everyone's PhantomCave treasure room is going to require an extension with all these new goodies, aren't they?
Yeah, it's like the Chronicle room.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we'll have to start building extensions and adding new shelves, I think, which is, I think, really interesting to see. Just going off that point you made, you know, how the Phantom has become such a popular figure in terms of the sort of licensed merchandise that we're seeing coming from a lot of these boutique companies, principally in America, but elsewhere as well.
Because we saw the we saw the new publication that is going to be, I think, was supposed to be released on, I think, in January, and that was from the German publishers. I had a discussion, I had a deep discussion last time, I think, on this show, and it was about them, I think, not releasing it on time or something like that. But yeah, and I also gave examples to say that we saw with Shakti Comics, when they first was publishing, they had a fairly, I would say, a couple of months delay, and then they obviously have been continuously publishing with new comics to come out hopefully this year.
Yeah, yeah, it's been interesting to see how the Phantom is reappearing in countries, you know, like in Brazil, I believe, and India and Germany, as you point out, where the character hasn't been around in print for some years, and now suddenly there seems to be a revival of interest. So I think it's really encouraging. I think I'm hoping that there is a genuine international revival of interest in this character, which I've always felt was in many ways the granddaddy, the forefather of the costume superhero. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about in my book, The Phantom Unmasked, America's First Superhero. Just to give you a bit of background, Bradley, the book is actually a revised and condensed version of my PhD thesis, which I undertook at Monash University back in, I finished it around 2014. So it was about 3 years between submitting my thesis and having the book published. But both the thesis and the book are basically interested in looking at how the Phantom, and I think many fans would agree with this, that the Phantom, even though the character was created in America, was created by Americans, Lee Falk and Ray Moore, back in 1936, how the character has kind of almost been forgotten in a large way by the American public. He was sort of overshadowed by Superman and Batman and all that,
like Warner Brothers and Disney.
Exactly right. But the really intriguing thing I found about the Phantom, and this is something that I only discovered as I did more research during my thesis, is how popular. I mean, I'd always known he'd been hugely popular in Australia. I'd grown up reading the Phantom comics in the late 1970s, but discovering just how popular he was around the world, often in cases more popular than his American rivals like Superman or Spider-Man or Batman, particularly in Sweden and in India. I think two countries which had probably the longest continual...
since I think 1950s.
Sweden, the Phantom comic begins 1950, and I think the first Phantom comic magazine in India is published in 1964, but it had appeared in a weekly magazine called, I think, the Illustrated News of India, some years before that. So the character was already well known to readers in Australia, Sweden, and India through its appearance in newspapers and particularly women's magazines and family magazines.
Yeah, and Women's Mirror.
Mirror, yeah, that's right, here in Australia, exactly right. And I think that's actually really key to the character's popularity in those three countries, because women's magazines and family magazines, unlike newspapers, were read by, just about everyone in the household. They were like, what people
they were like the modern day New Ideal, the modern day Woman's Weekly or something.
Exactly right. And they had national distribution, whereas newspapers tended to only serve, one city or one state or territory. Women's magazines like the Woman's Mirror or Vecko Revyn in Sweden, which is where the character first appeared in 1944, something like that. They had national distribution, so they reached a much wider audience. And that really intrigued me. I thought, well, why is this character who's been forgotten in his American homeland, why has he developed such a devoted intergenerational following in Sweden, India, and Australia. What links these three countries together? And that's basically what I was trying to find out in my thesis, which eventually got published in the book. And I'm looking at all the reasons why. The fact that it appeared in women's magazines first, the fact that the Phantom was such a moral character. I think his code of honor really appealed to readers there. He's a very moral character, has a strong sense of moral integrity.
Yeah, and I think when I interviewed Duncan Munro last year, he actually pointed that out in the interview, that the Phantom has such a big moral character that it's able to reach all these people.
Exactly.
Because he's just a kind-hearted person who's just wanting to stamp out bad people who are wanting to do bad things, if it would be in the jungle or in the cityscapes or anywhere, basically, any other over the world.
That's right. He's a very principled hero, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, in a time when I think a lot of comic book heroes have become kind of very violent anti-heroes. You think like even Batman has become that sort of figure.
To do with Joker. Like, I think I bought a story back in, I think it was a big trade paperback, hard copy book. It was, I think, done back in somewhere last year, but the story it featured in, I think, the James Tynion run of the Batman, and the issues were surrounding about, there was 3 Jokers, right?
Yeah.
So there's 3 Jokers, and obviously all those 3 Jokers, I think, were to do with dimensional sort of things. And I've seen, when I've read Batman, I don't read him too often, but when I actually do go and I read some of his books and stories and all the art that's in them, he right now, he's been quite a dark character right now. Even when the new Batman film comes out, when you see the first trailer of the Batman film that came back in, I think, October or November, it portrayed a very dark element for the character.
Yeah. Look, I think Batman has, from the outset back in 1939, when the character first made its debut, the character always was a darker, more sinister superhero, certainly more so than Superman. Superman is day, Batman is night. So you've got that really interesting opposition between them. But I think since the 80s and early 90s, there has been this trend towards very violent anti-heroes. You think of heroes like, Deadpool and Spawn and the latest iterations of Batman. And I think that's fine. I mean, for fans, long-time fans of those series,
they might enjoy it.
Exactly. And that's entirely consistent with the persona of that character. But I think, just as a contrast, I think the reason why the Phantom has remained so popular in so many different countries for so long is that even though he does use violence, directed against bad people and evildoers, he dishes out physical punishment, he sticks to a very rigid moral code. He's a very principled character. I think that moral dimension really appeals to people.
Yeah, I would say the Phantom is, he uses his skull ring, basically, but in a good way, not as in like a torturous way.
No, that's right. And even when he uses his gun, he never
like shoots it at someone. He would shoot it at someone's gun, and obviously when that happens, it's like lightning, fast but lightning, like one of those jungle sayings.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So I think that's really intrinsic to the character's appeal. And I think because another thing about the Phantom is his very unique setting. I mean, it wasn't until the 1960s when Lee Falk explicitly stated the character was situated in Bengala in Africa.
Yeah.
But for decades, you know, it could have been
India.
In India, it could have been set in the jungles of Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
it could be sub-Saharan Africa. And then you had stories where he's visiting America and like he's in New York City. So he was kind of, he had the freedom of movement, and it allowed people to think that, you know, oh, perhaps he, you know, readers in India could say, oh, look, you know, he's here in the jungle.
He's coming to our country or something, but fictionally.
Exactly. And don't forget the first ever Phantom story, the Singh Brotherhood, back in 1936, his home island where he lives in the Skull Cave was given as the island of Longtok, which is somewhere in the Java Sea. So that's Southeast Asia. So that's very close to Australia. So he's kind of, he lives in a sort of borderless world. He's not fixed to one specific place in the way that Superman is fixed to Metropolis or Batman is fixed to Gotham City. And I think that fluid kind of physical environment that he inhabits, deserts and jungles and cities, gives him a kind of freedom that other characters don't have.
Yeah. So my next question number 2, is where do you get your inspiration to write your interesting articles? Like, we've seen your articles obviously being published in some of the books that few publications have been publishing. And most of the times when those articles actually come out, I actually do read them and I find them interesting. Like, I think the last time I read an article which was published in issue 19 of Giant Size Phantom, which was it was characters who were based in Brazil and who were wrote by, like, basically the issues were wrote by Brazilian artists and Brazilian writers. Now, there's a guy who actually commented on the channel, and his name goes by Neville C. Bain. I actually read his article and I found it very interesting. And usually I find anything interesting when I'm reading stuff. So how do you get your inspiration when you write your very interesting articles?
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm glad you do find my articles interesting. I've just recently picked up my copy of Giant Size Phantom 19 and read the article by Neville C. Bain. I've known Neville and we've exchanged, you know, correspondence for some years now. In terms of the articles that I write for Giant Size Phantom, usually it'll be Glenn Ford, who's the publisher and the managing director of Frew. He'll say to me, look, we're going to have an issue of Giant Size Phantom and it's going to perhaps feature these characters, old characters from Frew.
Yeah, so he'll like point you in a direction to write your article in.
Exactly. So I think my next piece coming up, and it might be coming out this year, maybe. I'm not sure when. I've actually written a piece on The Shadow, which we've seen some episodes of The Shadow appearing in earlier editions of Giant Size Phantom.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites when they put those in, that character in that issues. He's one of my favorites.
It's a great little character, isn't it? And it had such a long lifetime. It ran
even after a few publications started not to publish it. It was also published in that article that Neville C. Bain actually was talking about. The character had an extended period in the country called Brazil.
Yeah, that's right. That's really fascinating, isn't it? It's really intriguing to see how characters like Sir Falcon, the Phantom Ranger, and the Shadow, even long after Frew had ceased publish them, they were not only the original Frew stories were being reprinted in Brazil, but the Brazilian publishers were commissioning new stories, as you mentioned. I think that's really fascinating. I would love to have known how that connection was made. And I think that sort of information is perhaps lost to us. I don't think those records exist anymore. That
would be interesting, though.
Yeah. So, to go back to your question, typically Glenn will say, look, we're doing an article, we're doing a feature, perhaps we're introducing the Panther or the Raven in Giant Size Phantom. Could you write a profile about their creator, Paul Wheelerhan? So I will do that. So typically the articles I write for Giant Size Phantom are in response to a request from Glenn Ford.
Yeah.
And often, I've written about these characters and these as old Australian artists in different forums. I've written about them in my blog. Comics
Yeah, I visited that website before.
Oh, good. Okay. I hope you found something useful and informative there.
Yeah.
So it's really good. I love writing for Giant Size Phantom. I think it's a great addition. I think it's a really good series. I love reading these obscure old stories, and it's a real pleasure to write for them. And I hope that even after this year, when my piece on the Shadow hopefully appears, I'll have an opportunity to write about more different characters that appear in the series as well.
Yeah, because firstly, I enjoy your articles. I enjoy Dudley's publisher notes, which are always like the last bit of the sentence, always entertaining. And recently I've enjoyed Neville C. Bain's article, which is, it's good to see that when a person, a younger person, if they don't even know about the Phantom or they don't know about these certain characters, if they have time to, they can read the articles if they have enough attention span to read them, and learn something that they may not have learned about.
Yeah, I really like the fact that, and this goes back to when, the late Jim Shepard took over as editor and publisher of the Phantom in the late 1980s, when he started doing his, editor's letter at the beginning and publishing the Phantom Forum. I think it's really good that Frew, under the direction of Dudley and Glenn, and Renee have continued that tradition. I like the fact that they cultivate this community of readers and that they make an effort to, explain the history of Frew and explain the history of the characters they're talking about, and in a way help explain the history of Australian comics, because Frew Publications is really our last surviving link with the golden age of Australian comics from the 1940s and 1950s. So I think it's really good that they've kept that going.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you for answering my questions and being able to come on today's show. And now we're going to be finishing our Talkback show with a new announcement. This week's announcement is that starting on the 24th of February, I will be taking a short 2-week break that will be ending on the 14th of March. If you have enjoyed today's Talkback show, you can message us through our social media platforms called Instagram at PhantomCave Reviews and on Facebook at PhantomCave. Now, if you would like to visit Kevin Patrick's website, where could they visit that from?
They could visit that at comicsdownunder.blogspot.com.
We would also like for the fans to obviously like, sharing, and comment who should we have out on our special guest next time. And as always, keep Phantom Caving, and we will be back with the Enthusiast episode number 3 next week.